Welcome back to episode 4 of the Data Strategist podcast. And we have got today Matt Lewis, who is a data and insight analyst at the Pobble Group. And, really great conversation about how he started out his career and how it's come sort of full circle now. Really fascinating to hear how he became a data analyst. We've got go through the sort of challenges that data analysts face. We've got what's the best thing about being a data analyst? We cover off visualization because I don't think visualization gets talked enough about. And I think it was a really good sort of insight into how important data visualization is and how much effort goes into that process rather than it just being numbers on a page. We cover off something that is never talked about in this forum or space, and that's around the imposter syndrome. And when you're technical, but then meet people who have got vast amounts of knowledge more than you, and it's really sort of a good thing to talk about because most of us will go through that as a data person. And then we've got some advice to how we would give to somebody who's starting out in analytics. So thank you to Matt for coming on. It was a real pleasure to have you on, and yeah, it's a great listen. So thanks very much. Okay, so thanks for coming on, Matt, to the Data Strategist podcast. This is episode 4 now. Obviously, I know who you are, like I do most people that come onto the podcast. So probably worth you introducing yourself to the millions and millions of people listening.
Hello, my name is Matt Lewis. I'm currently a data and insight analyst working for a large care provider and housing association. I work with Stu, and I've been working there now for about 3 years, almost 3 years.
Yeah, it's coming up to it. I think it's only next month, and it's been
It is
3 long, enjoyable years. Yeah.
3 long, enjoyable years. Yes, it has. Enjoyable being the key word. It has been enjoyable. It's been a journey. It has been a journey,
mate. It has been. Speaking of journeys, how did you become a data analyst? I think you've got quite an interesting story on how you became a data analyst, where you started your career right the way through to where you are now. I think it'd be really good to just cover that off.
It's a long story. It's been a long road. I've had quite a varied career. As you can probably tell, I'm an older gentleman. But yes, it was strange. I wasn't actually looking for it. To backtrack a little bit, I do have a background from many years ago, not so much in analysis, but using SQL quite intensively. That's going back about 25 years ago now. I worked for a local authority, and then I moved to working for a housing software manufacturer. And then after that, I kind of drifted into web design basically, and more design in general. And up until around 9 years ago, I'd had my own consultancy for about 7 or 8 years, worked for myself. I kind of got a bit burnt out, and believe it or not, I ended up getting into the care sector and working as a support worker. I just basically needed a complete change. I think more than anything, I wanted to do something that I felt was sort of giving my life some meaning, as it were. It was no acts are truly altruistic, but I needed to feel like I was getting something out of what I was doing. And I'm not going to lie, it was a big impact financially. It was a big impact, but those years changed me. They changed me as a person. I loved working in the care sector, as hard and as arduous as it was at times. But I sort of always had a fascination with data, and I guess more primarily with visualization more than anything. And I was obviously aware of Pobble, sort of big provider in the area that I live. And I just happened to be browsing the internet one day, and this job sort of came up. And it was during the throes of the last lockdown, and I'd had some pretty harrowing experiences and where I was working. And I just thought to myself, as much as it pains me to leave, I kind of need to get back to spend some 9 to 5 with my family, and have my weekends back to myself. And I really want to stay in the same sector though. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this job kind of like ticked all the boxes. And I guess sort of moving on to another thing that we're going to discuss later, my biggest worry moving into it was, you know, whether I was sort of still technical enough, because obviously I'd probably forgotten a lot more about SQL than I knew at the time. But I just went for it. I went for it, and I've got to be honest. When I was interviewed for the job, I really genuinely didn't think I was going to get it. But I guess, and again, thinking about a question that we're going to go on to later, I think it just shows how employers can value sort of operational and hands-on industrial experience that you have, that you probably don't think that they would take into account. It's not just about being technical. Yeah. So,
Yeah,
but anyway,
I think
that's primarily how I ended up here.
yeah, I think technical skills can be taught to most people, right? If you've got the right attitude, you can learn most technical skills. What is invaluable is when you get those real life experiences in sort of like you've had with working in support. That's an experience that most data analysts would never get. And they'd never truly understand the customer more than if they were actually the customer themselves. So it's a it's a unique aspect that you've got when it comes to sort of
Exactly.
working in this
And I guess
area.
sort of coming on board, like sort of I had I was kind of able to hit the ground running, as it were, with many things, especially with relationship building. You know, it's a massive part of it. Yeah. Sort of getting to the point whereby the stakeholders that you're working with day to day trust what you're saying, trust what you're advising, trust the insights that you're producing. You know, that you're on an operational level. You're there with them. You understand. You can always get to a point where you can sort of second guess what they're going to want. You know, because I've had experience from the other end providing those figures. Yeah, providing that information. So yeah, it's been a massive help. So yeah, I mean, I guess bottom line is it wasn't a hindrance. It was a massive benefit to me, you know, and hopefully the people that I work with.
Yeah, it really is. I think it's interesting. You went from sort of the web design, running your own business, and then you had burnout from that, and then you jumped into support work. Now, support work is probably would burn you out probably a lot more because you have to put your sort of your entire life into it. It's kind of a vocation rather than
Oh yeah,
just a
I mean,
career.
and you know, you wouldn't think it now, but I was actually quite introverted, really. You know, you're sort of stereotypical nerd for the most part. And if you'd said to me sort of 9 years ago that, you know, you'll be walking into a pub with a gentleman that'll be quite happily singing the national anthem at the top of his head, the idea of going in, and it was like one of those you know, those moments in a western where you walk into a bar and the piano stops playing, everyone turns around and looks at you like, you know, feeling about this big. There's no way that I would have done it, but you know, I could go back out and do it tomorrow. I could go back out and do
I
it
don't
tomorrow.
think
I absolutely loved
I
it,
don't
you know.
I don't think I could ever call you an introvert, Matt. Like, I've
Yeah,
seen
yeah.
your parrot shirt. That
Yeah,
is a
well,
shirt
yeah.
to be proud of,
Yeah, this is
and
quite a nice one.
it is. Yeah. You can't be called an introvert wearing shirts like that, Matt.
True,
That's not
true,
it's not true
true.
anymore. Maybe when you were younger, but definitely not
Yeah,
now.
and
Um,
I think sort of like graduating through the ranks as well, like in my last job, helped me because I was aware of what my operational managers required from me as a support worker in terms of recording, um, and the need for accurate recording as well, in order to be able to make any decisions from that, especially when you're dealing with you're supporting people with learning disabilities, and you do something called functional analysis with people who have got who experience challenging behaviour. Yeah. Um, and if you're not spot on with what you record, and I guess that throws over now what irritates me most, and I suppose you could say it's OCD when I see people who are, you know, sort of half-assed, recording things that ultimately I know they will want a very detailed analysis on. And I'll say, well, look, you know, your workflow and your practices in terms of recording need to be stepped up a notch. If you know this is your end product, and you're only going to get that end product if you do it properly, at a very granular level right from the start. So yeah.
I think what you've kind of described when you're talking about your affinity for analytics, you've talked about what a good data analyst does. Being part of what that customer is, being in the operation, being sort of one with the teams, the operational side, more than just the technical piece. So that's what a good and great data analysts do. I think you're not there to just provide reports. What you're there is kind of like a person or someone to support them and understand the business operation. And I think that's the difference between just somebody who throws a report out
Yeah,
and somebody who is a data analyst. So yeah, I can
yeah,
definitely see that you've got the good qualities there for that. And I think it's
yeah.
evident in what you do and the way you approach work. So
It's about investment in both directions, isn't it? Yeah, it's you being invested in what you do and your stakeholders, right, and then being invested in you. Yeah, and having that mutual understanding of process and operation and requirement. Yeah, that's kind of vital. Like I said, I'm in that very fortunate position where I've just been able to sort of like slot in for the most part. I imagine in a lot of organizations, you've got a degree of detachment. Yeah, and the data analysts sit over here. People phone them up and ask questions. They don't
yeah,
necessarily have an understanding about why those questions are being asked. They're just producing work, regurgitating things, without any real requirement to understand. I don't think I could work like that. I like the why. Why are you asking this? And I think that falls into a bigger part of you having that relationship with these stakeholders where they can come to you with a request and you can turn around and say, well, why are you asking that?
yeah.
Here's an alternative. Would this answer your question better? Yeah, more succinctly. Are you able to make decisions off what you're asking? So yeah, so many things.
Yeah, I brought up the next sort of question is like, what are the challenges for a data analyst? And I
Mm,
think you touched on some of them already, but what
mm.
what do you see as your biggest challenges? Maybe not necessarily just Pobble, but in sort of a data specific way.
I think sort of coming into an area of the business where, undeniably there were some trust issues. Yeah, when I first started, and I think, I'm not blowing my own trumpet, but me just being me helped with that. I wanted to sit down with people and talk and say, well, look, what issues have you had before? What do you think? Where do you think the inaccuracies lie? What do you think isn't being reported correctly? And more importantly, why isn't it being reported correctly? We're not taking into account, I don't know, these dates or this is being rounded up or whatever. It might be something really, really small. But I think my initial sort of thrust was you don't need to be reporting and then producing a report to check a report that I produce for you. That seems to be a ridiculous situation. You should have the trust in me to report what you need and believe what I say. Not only that, but the reason why you trust what I say is because you understand how it's been produced. Yeah, you understand what goes into producing it. And I think having that sort of like ability to have a consultative relationship and trust with your stakeholders, whether it be, I don't know, a key manager or a director, and simplifying that measure down to the point whereby they understand what goes into it. They may not understand all the intricacies, but they know why the figure is what it is. Yeah, what goes into producing it. That's important. And as I said, I've been lucky, able to hit the ground running, built that trust up quite quickly. That's always a challenge. I think that would be a challenge for anyone. And I
Building
guess for
trust
me,
is pretty massive, though, isn't it? It is
oh
a
yeah,
big factor. If people don't believe what you are saying and what you're producing, then
it's huge.
they're not going to trust anything that
It's huge.
you try to engage with them with. They're just going to close you off. So that is
Yeah,
a big
and it
factor, and I think it is
it
a hard
massively
skill.
it massively flies in the face of why you're there. If you think about it, it's like you might as well not be there.
Yeah, it definitely
um,
does. I think it doesn't. It's not necessarily about data quality. Then it is just about you
no,
know the trust they have in you as an analyst to do something that's not may not give them the result they want, but it's a
exactly,
result that is correct. Yeah.
exactly.
And I
Yeah,
definitely think that is a huge challenge for any data analyst in any sort of sector. It's not um, a company specific thing. I think when an analyst comes in, these are that is a real so soft skills and not many people have. Most people can get the technical, but the soft skills are really
yeah,
vital in building that relationship with customers.
totally. And also knowing how to pitch things as well, what level to pitch things at. You
Yeah.
you're going into a meeting and you've produced a dashboard and everyone's sat there squinting at it, and there's a load of stuff on there that they're really not interested in. You've potentially just wasted your time. They're not going to appreciate it. They don't need it. Yeah. But once you start to know people and you start to work with people and what they need, then that's where that comes in. And yeah, I've got to be honest, I feel like I'm in a really good position like that now. Not so much when I started. It was quite difficult, but and not because anybody was particularly defensive or antagonistic. It was just new person. What are your issues? I don't want to sort of rehash all the problems you've had before. Let's get this fixed. And I really sort of went down that route of getting things fixed. Yeah. So
yeah, I mean, our journey at where we currently work is an interesting one. Maybe one day we'll do a podcast on it. But I think building that trust is one of the things we had to do relatively early, and getting people on board with why we're there and what a data analyst should be doing was one of our sort of missions, and it's paid off massively for us as a group. So moving on a bit from challenges, what are the best things about being a data analyst?
I think it's the challenge itself for me. It's I quite enjoy I mean, electronics is a passion of mine. Anything that involves connecting the dots. I always think it's kind of analogous to, especially with data, especially with a big organization, one that's got sort of disparate recording practices, lots of systems that either interlink or are supposed to interlink and don't necessarily interlink that well. It's kind of analogous to sort of buying a jigsaw in a charity shop. I'll expand on that. So, you know what you want to end up with or what you're likely to end up with, and you've sort of got most of the information you need to hand, and it's all got to be ordered and sorted out. But in the back of your mind, you also know that there's a really high likelihood that there might be a few pieces missing. Yeah. So, I don't know. The other part, I guess, is it's really, really great to educate people and engaging people about what they can have, especially when they've got sort of little or no idea that certain information is either available or could be presented in a particular way. I mean, I think in certain areas of the business that I won't name, I really get a feeling that I don't know. Nothing beats that sort of Christmas morning look on a stakeholder's face when you present them with something, and not only that looks good, but it's going to save them hours of work. And to me, that's where I get my fulfillment from is having that sort of feel good feeling of them not necessarily appreciating what I've done, but thinking they can go away and they can probably spend their time doing something more productive or make better decisions, based on what I've done. So that's the best thing for me, I think.
That's a good analogy. Like opening a present on Christmas morning. That is yeah. I can see people's faces now when they look at a report. I can definitely relate it to that. It's quite cool.
Yeah, this is great, and I'm quite lucky because people, the sectors of business I work with, they are genuinely appreciative, and I do get a lot of good feedback, which helps. So
yeah, it is. I think that's another challenge to being a data analyst is sometimes doing the role is quite unforgiving and sort of appreciated because it's kind of, well, that's just your job. So, just you've delivered it, great. But the amount of effort that you have to put in, especially more on the soft skills side, is a lot. Like the technical stuff we've got, right? We kind of know it. We'll learn as we go along and we'll pick up new skills as we go along. But the soft skill stuff, it's a whole plethora of skill set that you've got to pick up as being a data analyst.
Yeah, and I think
it does go unnoticed sometimes.
If you push yourself that little bit further and you're constantly in a market for giving 150% with everything that you do, then you get to a point whereby you're not only answering the question that's been asked, but you're going an extra mile and picking up on inferences in the data and saying, oh, look, that may need a little bit further looking into. Yeah, I'll just put an extra page on this dashboard or another drill through or something. When I present it to them, I'll say, look, I've noticed this. And they'll go, oh, well, we need to look into that further. And then you can say, oh, yeah, I've already done that. Here it is. Yeah. I don't know, flagging exceptions. Yeah. data quality issues and say, look, I've got, you've got 79% of this. And the reason why you've only got 79% is because, the rest of these records have got sort of null values in them. Like, have they? Yeah, they have. Did you not know that? And if you go away and fix it, it'll be this. So, yeah, you really do have to go the extra mile, I think. Otherwise, it just becomes it's just another job. You really got to invest yourself in it. So, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. Do you think it's more of a vocation then, being a data analyst, or do you see it as a
I
9 to
don't know.
5?
I don't know because I'm in kind of a unique position in some ways. To me, it's a vocation because I still feel like I'm not still working in care, but I still feel like the work I'm doing is helping to drive better business decision making, which ultimately will lead to, better, more fluid, more rigorous care for the clients. Regulations are upheld, all those sorts of bits and bobs. I feel like I'm doing my bit from the background, yeah, and I guess that maybe alleviates a little of what I would perhaps consider to be survivor's guilt, which I do have for leaving the care sector during a particularly difficult time. Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, there's a selfish aspect to it, but it does help that I understand the data that I'm working with really well. Yeah. So yeah, but I mean, yeah, that's made me a better analyst. If I had to go and work for an insurance company now, I don't know whether I'd feel the same way. I generally don't. And I think working with data that you enjoy working with really, really helps. Data that you find interesting.
Yeah,
This is why
for sure that is a big.
I'll never be a finance analyst. I don't think I could. It's just one of
Yeah.
my.
Yeah, that's yeah. That it depends on what, like you said, it's what interests you. Like
Yeah.
if you are interested in the data subject, that helps you not only just understand the data that you're working with, but it
Mm.
also allows you to tell the story better.
Yeah,
Because
it
if
does.
you don't really like the data, if it's just like for example, you went on and became a financial analyst, you would just throw a monthly budget report out, and that would be it. It
Yeah.
wouldn't make you think about, could I improve that? But somebody who is interested in finance would be there trying to give analysis, trying to push further with that,
Yeah,
rather than it just
exactly.
being something. And you're doing it now with something you are passionate about, and it pays
Yeah.
off. Just sticking with a job that you don't really enjoy the data is not.
Yeah.
It's probably a good bit of advice for anybody. You know what? If you're just starting out, if you were Matt 20 years ago, 25
Mm-hmm.
years ago, however many years you want to go back, Matt, right? Um,
Yeah.
what advice would you give to yourself now if you were just starting out and you just want to become a data analyst now? What sort of advice would you give to somebody who want to be a data analyst?
Knowing what I know now, I think. I mean, obviously, 20 years ago, it was a very different sort of environment. I think I'd just throw myself into it, and I think, I mean, if you've got a basic appreciation for Excel and you enjoy playing around with figures, yeah, and you've probably done a little bit of analysis in your life, in your work, yeah, and you didn't even realize it, yeah. Analysis sounds like a very posh word. It sounds like a technical word, yeah, right. At the end of the day, what you're doing is you're looking for a pattern, yeah, or you're looking for an exception, yeah. You're answering a question, yeah. We answer questions every day in our general work life, yeah, and you'll have a lot of transferable skills to take with you as well. So my advice would be to think of industries that you either have some sort of investment in, an area that you like, yeah, look for opportunities. I mean, yeah, all right, you go in at a low level, it's probably not going to be like amazingly well paid, but you think of the opportunities to learning that you may be presented with. And there are so many jobs out there, yeah. You can bunny hop your way to wherever you want to be in relatively short order. You just got to go for it. It's something that I never thought I would get back into. The stars just
Yeah.
aligned and I ended up doing it, um, and I really enjoy it. And I have to say that because you're my boss.
Yeah, you do. This is a
but I,
biased podcast.
but I do it. But I do genuinely enjoy it. It has its frustrating moments. I'm not going to lie. It does. Yeah.
Look, I don't think there's a
Uh,
job in the world that doesn't, right? That's
no.
that'll be a myth if we were saying that it's all roses every day. It's not.
Mm,
It is it's a hard job sometimes because
yeah.
you're dealing either with customers who don't want what you're telling them, or you're getting poor quality data in.
Yeah.
But I think for anybody starting out, I think you know you've got to have that passion to do the job, and you've got to have that passion
Totally.
for the sector you want to work in. Because otherwise, doing it just because you think you're going to get paid more, it doesn't
Exactly.
always work out that way. So
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think we touched up a little bit about sort of how important storytelling is for customers,
Hmm.
and what I want to sort of the way that me and you work together. I think you've got sort of a really good skill set and a really good eye for visualization, and I think I'd just like you to touch upon why
Okay.
is data visualization important in this world, in this crazy career that we've got.
Oh, yeah, massively. I mean, you think about it, like what's the old saying? A picture's worth 1,000 words, yeah. But it's only worth that if it answers your question and you can understand it in data terms, yeah. So it's a massively wide-ranging question. Why is it important? Well, I guess ultimately, good visualization to a large extent is subjective, yeah. Um, I mean, for me, visualization needs to do two things. So first of all, obviously, it needs to answer or support the answering of questions that you've been asked, and also do that in a way that's obviously digestible and interpretable. But the key thing is it's for the audience that you're pitching it at. Yeah. So, I mean, ideally what it should do, other than sort of in really, really niche circumstances, is to get your audience to think. And I should add that, by thinking, I don't mean them sort of leaning forward and squinting. Squinting usually means that you've produced something that isn't clear or is over complex. Most of the time it will cause them to generate, it will cause it to generate more questions. Now, that sounds a little bit counterintuitive, really. You've just answered a question. Why would you want to generate more questions? Yeah. But if you generate an exception reporting, then the first thing is people are going to ask why. Why is it like that? Yeah. Now, hopefully, if you're a good analyst, you might have anticipated that. You might have gone on to answer that elsewhere in your dashboard, yeah, or your project or your presentation or whatever. But it should be food for thought, yeah. So good visualization should be food for thought, and it should be something that is as immediately obvious as possible. Yeah. So you're answering a question, right? And the answer is in front of you. Now, we obviously use visualization to not just let's say simplify, but to allow people to interpret data easily, yeah, or digest data easily. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into that. You've got to ask yourself, well, and consult with your stakeholders as you're producing your stuff. Yeah, don't just go off and do it and spend a week and a half doing it. Yeah, have a constant chain of feedback, conversation. Yeah, do you want a quantitative view? Do you want a comparative view, a proportional view of this? Yeah. Do you need to see how many, what your percentages are like? Do you want to see like, I've got 500 of these, or I've got 300 of these? Yeah. What do they want? And then produce that to their taste. So I just wind it right back. It is subjective, but it's only going to be good visualization. It's only going to be as good as that process that you go through to produce it. Yeah. And it's only going to be as good as that person that's ultimately viewing, yeah, or digesting what you've produced. So, yeah, I feel like I've just talked a lot and maybe talked myself around in circles.
No, I
Yeah.
think there's a lot to unpack there. I think you're right about creating data into an interesting viewpoint. So if you just take Excel can do charts and pivots and whatever, but it doesn't really help tell the story, and it's not very interactive. So when you put it into something like a Tableau or a Power BI, you've suddenly got all these things that you can start doing. And you're right, it's about when someone opens that page,
Mm.
what they get introduced to is a story. It isn't just a rag status. That's it. And I think
And it
what
should
about
it should be immediately obvious what you're saying, or as
hmm,
immediately obvious as possible. Yeah, that this
do you
is to
have
do
sort
with,
of
I don't know, absence, or this is to do with turnover, or this is to do with budgets. Yeah, you shouldn't have to squint at the legend to see what you're talking about. Yeah.
so how would you make sure that someone could, how would you ensure that someone has that then? So let's say you're building a HR dashboard versus a financial dashboard. How do you ensure that that story is told?
Okay, so right, so context is massively important. Yeah, so like throwing a ton of like poorly labeled visuals onto a page and cramming them on in order to answer a question like really works. So the first thing you need to do is you need to tailor what you're showing to answer the question, and you need to tell the story, right? So restate the question if you need to. Yeah, restate the question on the dashboard. Yeah, use it as your title. How many of these do we have? Or I don't know. Think of it in terms of, if you're providing somebody with a figure in a visual or a suite of figures. Let's take some time intelligence, for example, like over a year. I could say that in January we had 8 people leave the company. In June we had 7 people, and in December we had 3. Yeah, that's great. That tells us that we've had a little bit of a peak mid-year, and it's dropped back down towards the end of the year, right? So as an analyst, my first question is not only why have they left, but how does that compare to where we were last year? Yeah. So there are 2 very, very basic questions which can give an indicator in terms of year-on-year performance. And anecdotally, maybe are there issues potentially where those people have left the company? So whereas your stakeholder may have come to you and said, I need to know this year how many people have left the company. Yeah. You already know that they're going to want to know more information off the back of that. They're going to want to know something else. Yeah. A good analyst will already know that. Yeah.
This is the storytelling part, though, isn't it? It isn't just
exactly
putting a number on a page. This is, I know the next 3 questions you're going to ask me.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and I think on the flip side, a lot of analysts have probably got a fear of oversimplifying things. Yeah. To me, oversimplifying things is great. Yeah. If you can tell a story in a really, really simple way, yeah, and show a key indicator and make it really, really obvious, even with one visual, fab. Yeah. If you need to drill through off that, fine. But cramming 20 little bar charts onto a page to show all the various permutations of it, yeah, isn't the way to do it. People are going to look at that and their eyes are just going to fuzz. You get like white TV static. It doesn't work. You have to constantly put yourself in the position of the digester, of the viewer, of the person that has asked the question, or the group of people that has asked the question. Sit there, look at it and think, am I answering that question? Am I providing enough context to answer that question? Yeah. Is the data that I'm showing at a granular enough level for them to be able to get any idea of why this is happening? And if it isn't, then maybe I need to look at producing it in a different way, or showing it in a different way, or using a different type of visual to do it.
Yeah, I think maybe some tips then might be quite helpful here. Where when you load up that report, people, in my opinion, I haven't got any research on the back of this, people generally scan from left to right.
Yeah.
How do you create a report to make that seamless? Because or do you create a report that has a number towards the right? Think about the user experience. When they log in, how would you set that up? Because like I said, most people will go top left to bottom right as their kind of view. Or do you want to do like shock in your face type stuff?
I've got a relatively standard layout that I tend to try and use. So basically, your key metrics will be at the top in large figures. So depending on the question that's been asked, I'll go back to the example of I don't know. Let's take I produce a report that provides information on sort of the number of medication errors. Yeah. So medication errors across across the entire business in terms of our care provision. Yeah. So taking that as a classic example, the first figure that I want them to see on that page, yeah, short of being able to adjust the time period that it's set for, yeah, is how many there have been in the default time period. The next thing that I want them to be able to see is how that represents itself in order of time. So basically, there'll be a line graph there with a number of errors by month end, if you like. Yeah. So the first two things they see is I've got this many. Yeah. And this is how they're distributed over time. Right next to that, then, yeah, I've got essentially a top 10, if you like. Yeah. A top N of the areas of the business, if you like, at the most granular level, where those errors have taken place. Yeah. So the first three large key pieces of information in a dashboard is you've got this many, this is when they happened, and this is where they are. That's it. Yeah. Anything else then is ancillary to that. So they would be able to drill in and see who had been involved in those errors. Yeah. What the type of error was. So all that stuff that they really need to get into the meat of, they'd immediately be able to drill into. But in terms of their reporting, yeah, what they would want to see, because obviously, some of these people that are doing returns and this, that, and the other, all they want to do is be able to switch a dashboard on, click on a link to a dashboard, get it up, and have the figure there, bang, maybe adjust the time period to get it. That's it. Yeah. So a lot of it is about ergonomics. And essentially, I think my web design past has again helped me with that a little bit in terms of like how people navigate around dashboards, where their calls to action are essentially within dashboards themselves. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Because I think it is important that when you build a dashboard, it isn't just to chuck, like you said, loads of statistics up because you can, because you've only got a little bit of real estate, right?
Yeah.
You haven't got an infinite amount, and most people don't sort of tabulate it. They'll just go, I got one square, and I'm just going to chuck everything in, and then you don't really tell the story. You don't have any standout metrics. You don't really have any, it's not useful for a business operation. It's kind of just, they'll just use the one bit of the report that they need. The rest is completely useless. So I think, having that sort of left to right viewpoint, and, you'd have, I think on some of the reports would have sort of like a different color for the metric that means the most. The one that you want people to see the most. So color palettes are important. I don't know whether you want to cover off any sort of thing around color schemes and palettes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, you may have, sort of corporate color palettes that you need to use. Obviously, that's a given. I think having massively contrasting colors isn't necessarily really good on the eye. Pick a palette. What I generally tend to do is pick a palette. I'll pick a palette of 3 colors. Yeah, 3 colors in grey, and it all depends on, for example, if I want to split down a bar graph and people have got a line graph and people have got the ability to go in and sort of like legendize it and have multiple business areas, let's say, you're never really going to be able to get around that. They're all going to have different colors. But ultimately, I think it needs to be easy on the eye. It needs to be easily digestible, and it needs to be easy to navigate around. Yeah, those are the 3 main things. I'm not going to recommend colors because everyone's got their own personal preferences.
No. But it is important because I think when people think about a dashboard's just got put together and they go, "Oh, that looks nice," what they're not thinking about is that data analysts like yourself have had to go through a process of selecting the right colors, selecting the right charts, producing the right numbers, and placing them in a position that allows them to just know what's going on.
I spent days selecting colors. Days. Sometimes days go by.
It's an unsung thing, isn't it?
I really like dark themes because they're easier on the eye. Yeah, I really like dark themes. Our business traditionally doesn't employ dark themes. Although one of the big compliance dashboards that I work with, I sort of incepted with a dark scheme. That's been accepted really well. But obviously, we try and stick to standards. That's important. But I will admit, I do find myself being a little bit restricted because I like to experiment with things. So I'd love to just sort of fly off, and every business area would have a completely different look.
I think that's important. That's a good point to pick up on, though, is that when you work in a company, there does have to be sort of a set standard on how you produce things, so then everybody can look at every report and know what's going on, and they're not getting these sorts of different views, different aspects, because it doesn't help build that trust as well. You know, we mentioned
Yeah.
trust earlier, and if you're putting out reports that look different every time, people
Yeah.
won't know or feel like it's the same person. It's like any artist, right? If they just
Yeah.
produced loads of different types of pictures in all different sort of um can't think of the word off the top of my head. They just put it out in different styles, then people wouldn't know it's them. So that there's no
Totally.
trust to that art that goes out.
And that's something as a team that we have sort of got better at. Um, sort of at least over the last 12 months. I think because we started like pretty much all at the same time. We all had our own sort of inimitable style. Everybody's styles develop over time. Um, and there's got to be a bit of compromise there. I might not like something one of the other guys does. He might not like something I do. But I think it's like wearing a school. It's like wearing a school uniform, isn't it? At the end of the day, if you've got a corporate style, then you just stick to it. I
Yeah,
can
for
produce
sure.
I can produce amazing looking stuff in my own time, in the comfort of my own room.
Well, I think there's a difference between reporting and analytics or analysis. One-off
Yeah.
pieces of analysis can be done in a flare, right?
Yeah,
But then
yeah,
when
yeah,
you're
yeah.
trying to produce something that's going to be used by an operation every day, then
Totally.
that should be standardized to again build that trust with you and your
Yeah,
customers and know
yeah.
that it's come from a designated area, or
No,
you've
yeah,
worked with other analysts. I think that's definitely the
yeah.
position that people should find themselves in.
And I'm terrible. I'll pick up on stuff and I'll just run with it, and then I'll realize I spent half a day working with it and making it look really really cool. And I'll look at it and I think, nah, there's no way I can send that out to the business. I need to standardize it. But I
You
save a
need to
copy.
roll it back.
I save a copy and occasionally go back and look at it.
Oh man, yeah, it's it's a tough thing. Like I said before, I don't think people really realize that it is a skill in its own
Mm.
right.
Oh yeah,
Visualization is a very hard thing to master. I
yeah.
think
And
again,
again,
if you have a
it is
good
about going.
standard
It is about.
visualization,
I was
oh,
going
go
to
on.
say that's another area where you really need to think about going the extra mile and really, really think about the person that's going to be using your dashboard. Right? You might have built it, yeah, but you're not the one that's going to be using it every day. So your ease of navigation, correctly labeling, using tooltips, yeah, making it sure that all right, you can do all that and it can still be terrible to look at, yeah. So
Yeah,
not everybody is as design orientated, perhaps maybe as me, yeah. And I'm not brilliant, but and I probably do spend too much time, yeah, worrying about aesthetics. I will admit to that,
you're
yeah.
telling your boss on a public forum that you're
I will
yeah, I
admit to
spend a
that,
lot of
yeah,
time on this. Less about delivering, more about making something
yeah.
look pretty.
It
Uh,
is, yeah, yeah, yeah. Doesn't matter if the data's wrong. Yeah, doesn't matter if your insight's wrong. As long as it looks good, it's fine. Yeah,
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 because I wouldn't say it's as important, but it is definitely one of the top sort of priorities to have a good, strong
totally.
visualization piece.
Yeah,
But I think data quality obviously
mm,
does override most of that, and sort of
yeah.
making sure that you actually tell the story
And
is most important.
I think the other thing you've got to appreciate as well before you go off and spend like 2 days working on one page of a dashboard to get it look really nice. Yeah, what you've got to appreciate is the fact that not everybody that sees it is going to have the same sort of level of appreciation as you have. They might be perfectly happy with. So yeah,
That is also a factor that you have to consider because I think we've all been there when we've had a um, delivered a dashboard that we're super proud of, and then they just go, "Oh, I just need to export that to Excel."
yeah,
That
totally.
happens more than people like,
Break.
and that happens in every company. There is
Yeah,
no sort of that's a
yeah,
thing in data analytics. Is you build
yeah,
something that you think is a
yeah.
masterpiece, and
Yeah,
then
and so the bottom line is, if you want to do it right, do it for you, and do it because it's the right thing to do. Don't expect to have anybody come back to you and go, you'll get people go, yeah, oh my god, it looks amazing. I really like how you put some navigation in there because it makes it so much easier for me to get around. You know, Great.
yeah, that's
You
true.
know,
Yeah,
so
very true, Matt. Very true. Now
but
we talked.
Answer the question. That's the key. That's the key takeaway. Answer the question.
I think you're right. Answering, yeah, 100% agree. Now I'm going to change tact a little bit here.
Mm-hmm.
We mentioned it earlier on around
Mm,
sort of joining a technical team So if this happens to any walk of life, but if you're a junior or someone who hasn't got the background as some of the other people, or join a team of technical experts, there is sort of this. I'm pretty sure it's called this, but it's something that I've called it this many a time, and it's the imposter syndrome. I think
Mhm.
it's something that, again, people don't really talk about too much in these sorts of environments. We kind of just accept the fact that we've got to put ourselves through this emotional
Yeah.
state. So yeah, I just wonder if you want to give some thoughts on it.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a few facets to this, isn't there? I mean, I guess a lot of it comes down to how much confidence you've got in yourself. So that's your baseline, isn't it? Yeah. But I think anybody, I mean, I've still got it. I've been in nearly 3 years, and I think if you're a perfectionist, or it is probably worse. And if you're working in a role where sort of accuracy is paramount, yeah, then that can just compound it even more. So I think it's definitely something that most people who either sort of make a dramatic career change, or even get a large promotion, probably fall into the trap of to one degree or another. But I think the biggest thing that I would say about it is, you've got to remember that sort of questioning yourself and your own judgment isn't necessarily always a bad thing. Yeah. If you do it too much, it can be. But I mean, I've just alluded to it. I still take like an excessively long time to do a lot of things. And, you shout at me because I regularly get messages on Teams saying, "Why are you still in work?" But, I do work extra hours to make sure that I get things spot on. But that's me. Yeah, I sleep better that way. Yeah, I do sleep better that way. I'm not as bad as I used to be, but I still have my moments. Um, but I guess I guess for me, I suppose my sort of past employment history hasn't really helped with my sort of degree of imposter syndrome, because like being self-employed and sort of like working long hours and having to make sure that my clients got 200% out of me so they keep coming back. Yeah. And then working in care where every I needs to be dotted twice, which is highly regulatory. I think when I moved away from that, like now, I mean, how often do you need to nag me to book holidays? You have to nag me to book holidays all the time because I don't even think about taking leave. Yeah. I throw myself into things 200%. Yeah. But I still doubt. I still have that degree of self-doubt. But that's a very personal thing. And I think once you start getting that feedback, and we alluded to this earlier, when you get feedback, I think that is the primary key to overcoming it. Positive feedback, and acting on potentially negative but constructive negative feedback, as I'd like to call it, act on that in a practical way. It starts to validate you, and I think eventually you will start to relax. And that's
Yeah.
where I am. That's where I am now, basically. I think I'm quite lucky that I do get quite a lot of positive feedback, but then that might be because I engage with the people I work with quite a lot. I'm constantly having those conversations. I'm not going out there looking for it. Yeah. But to get that self-validation, I think that's really, really, really important. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I,
to, and to, sorry, go on.
I was going to say that lots of people do suffer with it, though, and it's not
Oh
necessarily
yeah.
about um, I suffered it with myself, so it's probably worth sharing that a little bit. When I left or joined as a data analyst in a contact center, and then
Mhm.
moving down to London, where I was knew VBA and Excel really well, where I was king, and then everyone would come to me for the answer. Then I went
Yeah.
down to work in London, staying near London. People would then know SQL, and they knew data structures, they knew how data flows, they knew ETL processes, and they were so far advanced to where I was, but I was managed to get in to work with them. So what that led to was I shouldn't be here. That feeling of
Yeah.
I got this job, but I shouldn't really be here because these people are way too far ahead of where I am.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, that self validation is really important for you, but
Yeah.
also it can be a negative problem having this imposter syndrome because you will try too hard,
Oh,
and then
you will,
people
and
will alienate you as well.
you run the risk of burning yourself out as well. You really do. I've been fortunate in that, I've got a really, really good team of people around me, who are all really, really, really encouraging. When I first sort of airdropped into this role, and I never forget it, the first day that I fired SSMS up, my first ticket that came in, and it was something to do with one of our older SSRS reports. And I pulled the primary script out of the report, out the RDL, fired it up. It was something like 350 lines long. And I was looking at it and I was thinking, what the hell have I done? Because it just but what you've got to remember is that when you first start in a role like this, and I'll take sort of imposter syndrome in a data analyst or I don't know whether you're an engineer or whatever, but anything to do with something like anything to do that involves complexity and knowing the data that you're working with. Half the battle isn't the fact that maybe your SQL necessarily isn't up to scratch. Half the battle is knowing what that table is, what that field is, what the data type of the field is, how that field relates to. You haven't got any idea. Do you know what I mean? It's a massive familiarization exercise, and you airdrop into a new job and you think, right, okay, not too bad at SQL, crack on, give me a problem, I can get on with it. No, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen for like the most qualified people. Yeah, it doesn't work like that. Life isn't like that. So, be reasonable with yourself, I think. Yeah.
And I think when you get into those positions, you do kind of look left and right to your teammates and your peers. And if they're technical and they're getting on with it, sometimes that makes it worse for you because you're kind of like, oh, why am I further behind from these people? They've started when I started, and now I'm back here, and I've got to try and catch up. But I think it's okay to feel that way, though. I think it is just a natural thing to feel, and every one of us go through it. And if anybody is ever going to listen to this podcast, I think that's a message I would like to give them: is it's okay to feel like you've got imposter syndrome, but talk openly about it. Don't hold it to yourself. I think, in our team, we talk openly about these sorts of things because it helps us all understand where we are and making sure that we don't sort of leave anybody behind and just.
It's okay. It's okay. It's okay to fail. It really is okay to fail. Yeah,
it definitely is.
It is.
Yes, it definitely is okay to fail. And I think you've got to have the right team and the right culture to allow that to happen. Because if there's people listening and they go, oh, if I fail, I lose my job. Well, then you're probably in the wrong place anyway, because you're not going to be able to grow in that job.
Yeah,
you're just not.
Yeah. It is. It's okay to fail, and it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to lean on the people around you. I mean, if you've massively bulled on your CV to get your job, that's your own lookout. Do you know what I mean?
Well, but there is that. I'm trying. I think they deserve to lose their job if they said they can do everything and can't do nothing. But I think there's definitely an aspect of when you join a company as a junior starting out, and say if you're a junior or just new to it and you get a role as a data analyst rather than going through sort of a couple of junior data analyst roles, that jump's quite big. And when you go in and you're going into a technical team, everyone will look at you and go, no, don't do that. Don't be this try hard type personality, because it'll alienate you when you first go in. Just be open and honest about what you can and can't do. And people in this community, I think in this community, in the data world, people are more likely to help you.
Yeah, they are.
I think we've got a really strong culture like that.
You've got to. I mean, for me, my experience was sort of coming in, seeing a relatively huge business with lots of facets, with lots of data floating around from all different sources, and being slightly overwhelmed, I think, to start off with, questioning my own sort of technical ability as well. But then the way I sort of counteracted that by way of self-validation and sort of alleviating those symptoms, as it were, was to use the fact that I had a lot of data accessible to me, that I could learn or relearn in an applied way with, not just sitting down watching YouTube videos, trying to get up to speed, watching some disparate thing about, I don't know, shark attacks in Mauritius from 2019 or whatever. Actually working with, getting onto Kaggle and getting some data, actually working with stuff that I was sort of being drip fed anecdotal information about on a day-to-day basis, and gaining an appreciation of the environment that I was working in. Because even though I come from a care company, yeah, like this is a different care company with different policies and different procedures, and different rostering system. You name it, everything's different. So yeah, I did burn the midnight oil for a good few months to get myself back up to speed, sort of like SQL wise. I'd never touched Power BI before. Yeah. So that was a completely new experience for me. I hated it then and I hate it now, but it does the job, So
That's okay. Good feedback.
but
I
no,
think
it's
these things, visualization tools are kind of much the same. I think we're going on to a different subject altogether here,
yeah,
but I
yeah,
think
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Power BI has its merits because it works well within the Microsoft stack.
yeah,
But
totally.
then if you look at Tableau, it does have a better visualization sort of layout, and you can definitely
Yeah,
do better stories with it. Um,
yeah,
mm, yeah, we've got way off topic now.
I know,
Let's just
I know.
jump straight into
And
the hatred you have for Power BI.
no, no, no. I just think it's clunky. I think when I'm looking at like sort of really really obvious fixes and stuff that people have posted onto the board or made suggestions and stuff like sort of 4 or 5 years ago, and they still haven't been implemented. Sort of like quality of life improvements to the application. And I don't know. I think it's somewhat neglectful given the considerable amount that it's used around the world. So the least Mr. Gates et al. Could do, just go and do it. Just get it done, get it fixed. I love
There
it
you
then.
go.
Give you
You've heard
give
it
you a
here
five
first.
five
Now
star
get
rating.
Mr. Gates.
Yeah, totally. Give you a
Mr. Gates
5-star
needs to
rating.
know this.
Yeah, totally. So
Hey, look, man, it's been really good talking to you. I think it's
thank you.
we've covered off quite a lot here around, and again, you've got a really interesting story, right? You were started out as a web developer, came into care and support, started as a support worker, went to support manager, and then now you're working as a data analyst on care and
Yeah,
support. And I think, most of these journeys that, of the people I'm speaking to, they're just incredible journeys, and not everybody comes from the same background. Everyone's got their own sort of story, and it's been fascinating to hear yours. And I thank you for sharing it. But yeah, thanks very much for coming on.